Welcome to the Kinky Connoisseur, where we talk about love, lust, consent, and everything BDSM, kink, and sex. Today, we're going to be talking about HBO's saucy new series, The Idol, starring Lily Rose Depp and The Weeknd. And this series is not the shit show you've been told. It is actually fantastic, and I would say it's quite sexually liberating to watch and not degrading, as some people might want you to believe. And we're going to break down why this show is fantastic and deserves a slot in my sex and cinema series, and that it deserves a seat at the table when it comes to being compared to other shows and films discussing BDSM and kink and just overall sexual prowess and female just domination and empowerment through their sexuality. First, going to break it down over character analysis. And of course, we have to start off with Lily Rose Depp's intensely provocative and complex pop star character, Jocelyn. Now, the people that want to push the narrative that this show is exploitative to women want to just gleefully point out all of Jocelyn's overt sexuality, her very vivacious and free way that she is doing all of these sex, drugs, and rock and roll that, is romanticized in the music industry. And by association, they are claiming that because Lily Rose Depp is playing this very complicated, overtly sexual character, that therefore Lily Rose Depp must have been exploited in some regard. And I think this couldn't be further from the truth. They are trying to portray Lily Rose Depp as being this naive, green, nepo baby actress that has never been on a set like this before, which is ridiculous. She is so much more than simply just a nepo baby. She is exceptionally talented in her own right. Yes, she is incredibly lucky and privileged to have been born into the family that she was born into, particularly wanting to work in the entertainment industry. So yes, of course, she has a lot of privilege that you and I would have to fight to get. However, she has proven herself to be not only a talented actress, but a talented model. She's on her IMDb page. It shows that she's been in 15 productions, and there's 2 upcoming productions. So The Idol is far from being her first nor the last acting role that she has had. And she, grew up modeling, and she has been modeling for Chanel for a very long time. She has the Johnny Depp as her father and Vanessa Paradis as her mother, who are incredibly gifted musicians and actors and sex symbols. So to me, it makes perfect sense that she would want to play a sex symbol musician. And she grew up in France. She was born in France and is French American. And in continental Europe, generally speaking, they are not nearly as prudish when it comes to nudity and sexuality as we are here in the States. So, and also it was famously discussed, I think that she had spoken about that she had had her first joint at 13. So she certainly is not this naive girl to the entertainment industry or to the world in general. She has experience. And many of the so-called journalists that are poking at The Idol and saying that she was exploited keep referring to her in a way that is very degrading. They're not really talking about her as if she is a grown person that has agency. She's a 24-year-old grown-ass woman who decided to take on this incredibly challenging role and step up, and she now has become a sex symbol due to this show in her own right. And I think she knocked it out of the park, as far as I'm concerned, in her acting abilities. Another thing I wanted to discuss was the costume design and how the people that are pushing this narrative of that it being exploitative point a lot to how they think the clothing is too revealing, too sexualized, and that in this regard it is depraved and she is nothing more than an object. And I completely disagree with this notion. For the simple fact that I really felt empowered watching Lily Rose play Jocelyn in the outfits that she wore. For the simple reason is for that I'm also very petite. I have a very similar body shape to Lily Rose. And to see an actor who, quite frankly, is not very busty, is a smaller, petite woman, play a sex symbol like she did, was with clothing that was really designed for a smaller bust to enhance her small bust, I thought was incredibly empowering. Through the decades, if you look back, when it came to depicting sex symbols, they were all women that were generally very busty, whether they were naturally busty, like back in the 50s and 60s with Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield and Elizabeth Taylor, or, had some enhancements like Britney Spears and Madonna and certainly Pamela Anderson in the 90s. To then go to Lily Rose Depp being naturally petite and flaunting that and being like, you know what? I'm a fucking sex symbol and I'm going to have my tits out and I'm not going to fucking care that, I've got an A cup or a B cup. Like, I'm still fucking hot and I'm going to show it off and I'm not going to feel like I have to feel like you're lacking. She wasn't wearing excessive padding at all or excessive push-up. Sure, a lot of the outfits did have some push-up, but there was really no excessive padding at all. I mean, in many of the scenes, her tits were out or she wasn't wearing a bra at all. You would see her nipples. Her nipples were hard, like, constantly. I don't know if they had ice cubes on hand, but to me, that was a huge part of her character, was that she didn't give a fuck about what people thought. She was like, I'm a sex symbol and I'm gonna fucking flaunt what I got. And for someone like myself who is small busted, that to me was really liberating. I thought that was really positive and had body positivity in that regard. And to prove that, you don't have to be a double D to be seen as hot. I think that's incredibly positive. There's another topic I wanted to briefly touch on in regards to Lily Rose and her character and why I think this is a major reason why the show has gotten such unfair negative press. And I think a lot of it simply has to do with the shallow fact that she is Johnny Depp's daughter. Not even just the idea that she is a Nepo baby, as I discussed earlier, and how I think that is unfair due to her talent, but the simple fact of the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial and how much of the mainstream media had depicted it as being Amber's show, being that she was innocent, when anyone who actually watched the trial clearly could tell that she was the abuser, she was the aggressor, and Johnny was honestly the victim of her. Sure, they didn't have a perfect relationship. That was clear. But Amber truly was the one who was abusive and concocted this hoax against her former husband to get money and clout and cheap fame out of trying to ruin him. And I think that has trickled down into his daughter, unfortunately. People don't want Lily Rose to win because she is Johnny Depp's daughter. And I think the There is an underlying narrative that I will continue to discuss throughout the video with the idol that I think is mocking cancel culture. But first, we're going to talk about Abel Tesfaye, also known, of course, professionally as The Weeknd, and his character, Tedros. A man that we love to hate. And unfortunately, just like with Lily Rose Depp's character, Jocelyn, people are creating a narrative around his character and that they're saying The Weeknd is creepy and that he was a horrible actor. And you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, no, I think The Weeknd actually did a brilliant job. He was a brilliant actor for the simple reason that he truly played an amazing villain in this show. He was able to create all of these highs and lows and this kind of animalistic tension that Tedros had, where you just loved to hate him. You wanted to continue to watch him. You wanted to know what he was up to, what he was going to do, but you hated his guts because you knew he was no good. And that's acting. That's not The Weeknd being The Weeknd or The Weeknd being a bad actor. That's The Weeknd being an amazing actor and playing this character out exactly how he wanted him to be. Tedros is this brilliant yet uncomfortable character that also has great comic relief. You know, throughout the different episodes, he can be incredibly scary and manipulative and controlling. And yet simultaneously, he can be absolutely hilarious, particularly in how he interacts with other characters. And I think that speaks volumes to the brilliance of The Weeknd's ability to craft this character and really have him shine in this like dingy, uncomfortable light that we just kept wanting to stare at, like a moth to the flame. And I hope that The Weeknd continues to do other acting roles. I think this was a great role, and a lot of people were uncomfortable by his acting for the simple reason that they did not care for the sex scenes. They thought they were and were not what they were expecting, not the narrative that they wanted to have in their mind when concocting this series. And I'm going to go into great detail about those sex scenes and whether or not I think consent was violated and my thoughts on how they depict kink in this series. And we'll get to that in a little bit. Now we're going to get into the secondary characters of the idol. And I thought they were absolutely brilliant. I thought they were one of the strongest casts I have seen in a very long time. They all had very complex, intertwined characters that really lifted up Jocelyn and Tedros and helped to cultivate the multi-dimensional universe that the idol exists in. They not only provide great comic relief, but also commentary that is very relevant to today, particularly with cancel culture in the entertainment industry. And that I thought was deliberately sprinkled throughout the entire show. And we're going to get into that now. Jocelyn's side of the table, so to speak, and her secondary characters revolve around her managers, her music executives, and her close friends that work for her. Her managers are Destiny, played by Divine Joy Randolph, and Haim, played by Hank Azira. And they seem to genuinely care about Jocelyn's well-being and her mental health, whereas the music executives, Nikki Katz and Andrew Finkelstein, very much care about their bottom line. And if Jocelyn is performing well, okay, great. She's gonna keep going. But if she's not, and she might be more trouble than she's worth, then they might drop her. And so that was a big overarching part of the plot throughout the show. And then there's Leia, who is played by Rachel Sennott, and she is Jocelyn's best friend slash personal assistant. And there's a lot of comic relief also from her and her just discomfort with Jocelyn's sexuality. Then there is Xander, who is played by Troy Sylvan, and he and Jocelyn have a very complex relationship, also dating back to when they were kids. He is her creative director. Now we're going to discuss Tedros's side of the table and his quote-unquote cult-like followers who are musical geniuses in their own right. And there are three in particular that we will be discussing. Diane, who is played by Jenny Kim. She is basically a Trojan horse in Jocelyn's world. She slips into her inner circle as a brilliant backup dancer and convinces her to join her one evening to go to a club. This club happens to be, of course, Tedros's club, so that he can introduce himself to her and make it seem as if it was done organically when he had planned this all along. And then there's Isaac, who is played by Moses Sunny, and Chloe, who's played by Susanna Sun. And they also have a bit of a cult-like persona to them. Chloe has a bit of a Charlie Manson girl kind of vibe to her, particularly in the beginning. The final character we will be discussing is Talia, played by Hari Neff, who is a journalist, and she symbolizes the narrative of the media and how much control it has on the narrative of the celebrities that they cover. So we aren't sure in the beginning if Talia is on Jocelyn's side or she's against her. There's a very compromising image of Jocelyn that comes out at the beginning of episode 1 that Talia is there to discuss with her. And so throughout the show, Talia symbolizes the media and its overarching effect on how the people like Jocelyn, pop stars, and other musicians are seen by the general public. And that becomes discussed more later on. We are now going to discuss the consent question within the idol. The most important part, I would say, to this video and to the critics that are saying that this show is violating consent of the main character, Jocelyn. We are going to break this down through discussing the different sex scenes that occur throughout the series. The first being, of course, her being blindfolded by Tedros and engaging in breath play and knife play with him, where he puts a scarf over her face so that she cannot breathe very well, and then he puts a knife up to her mouth and cuts a hole so she can breathe. Many critics point to this scene as being the start of unconsensual play between them. However, I would go out on a limb and say there was consent. Was it explicit consent and they discussed everything beforehand? No. But it is also a show. It is not real life. Just like pornography is not real sex in real life. So yes, in real life, would you want to explicitly state what you would be doing in a scene, particularly if you were going to engage in risk-aware consensual kink, such as breath play and knife play, which I'm going to do a whole separate video on? Yes, you would want explicit consent. However, as I stated, since this is not real life, I don't believe it was necessary to put that in the show. They also show earlier in that episode that she is interested in erotic asphyxiation, where she's choking herself and masturbating. People also were saying how uncouth that was, or how that was a dangerous idea to put into people's heads, particularly younger women. However, I think that is an overreaction. I believe they put that in the show due to linking the idea that Jocelyn enjoys breath play, and so when her and Tedros begin to explore that with each other, it is already assumed that that is something that she enjoys through the narrative of the story. The next scene that critics have had a hard time with sexually would be the hairbrush scene, where she talks to Tedros about her mother's physical abuse of beating her with a hairbrush. Tedros then decides to spank her with the hairbrush in a way for her to overcome her anxiety and codependence with her deceased mother. Then after this, he does engage in aftercare with her, giving her a shower, giving her a bath. There's a scene where he's shaving her legs. So I do think it does show a type of kink element throughout that is consensual, that there was consent to engage in that scene, and then there was aftercare afterwards, as you would in an actual BDSM scene. Sure, again, was there explicit discussion of consent, of boundaries, of safe words that you would in an actual scene? No. But again, it is a television series. They can only fit so much within a certain time slot for each episode. And so for them to cut fluff like that out is understandable. There is a double entendre as well with the hairbrush and its symbolism and the story that Jocelyn has about it. At the end of the series, we come to find out that this story about the hairbrush and the abuse may be completely false, and that it was her way of manipulating Tedros into doing what she wanted. And I think that is definitely a nod towards cancel culture and false allegations. There are also critics saying that it was clear that Jocelyn was afraid of Tedros, and I think throughout the series it is quite clear that it is the exact opposite, that she does not fear him. And there are several instances of this. The first is when she slaps him very hard in front of many people. The next would be when they are shopping and they are having sex in the changing room, and she tells him to figure it out and not her. And then the third, which I thought was by far the most powerful, would be when she realizes she has been betrayed by Tedros, and this was all a setup by him for him to get into her inner circle. She decides to invite her ex-boyfriend to her home and immediately bring him upstairs to her bedroom and have sex with him and lock the door. And Tedros goes up, is pounding on the door, and she does not care. This is a total symbolic slap in the face to him. If she was truly afraid of him, she would not have done any of that, let alone her ex-boyfriend in the same bed that she was fucking Tedros. Now, the only part that I would agree with the critic in that there was an unconsensual scene is, of course, the scene where Xander has the electric dog collar on him and he is being shocked against his will. That to me was definitely the cringiest part of the entire show that I agree with was unnecessary. I didn't think it really led to much with that scene. And I thought it depicted Jocelyn as quite the bully and the dictator, and it just seemed a bit out of character to have her be so ruthless. Though at the end of the series, some of that ruthlessness does come out when she is on stage with Tedros, and Tedros realizes that he has been played. The only other part that does make sense is, of course, how Xander is blackmailed into taking a photograph with Jocelyn's ex with a woman on his lap, and then insinuating later that that man had SA'd that woman in the photo, even though that was completely false. Again, nodding at cancel culture and false allegations. I agree also that I felt the last episode of the series did have some quirks, and it did seem like there definitely needed to be an additional episode. Again, with the false essay allegations, it seemed like that story arc was not complete whatsoever. So my one criticism would be really the just lack of loose ends tied when it came to certain subplots, such as the essay allegations. Cancel culture references are also discussed throughout the series in multiple ways through the supporting characters. One notable instance is when Leia and Isaac, who have become intimate, are discussing how Jocelyn and Tedros interact with one another in front of others while they are recording. There's a scene where Tedros is basically getting Jocelyn off while she is recording her music. And Leia refers to it as a quote-unquote assault. And Isaac chuckles and is like, that's an assault? And I think that's a very poignant part of the series, where the idea of, because someone is uncomfortable, they are projecting their uncomfortability onto someone else, onto another situation, where the two people involved could be completely consenting to everything, but the onlooker does not consent and is feeling uncomfortable, and therefore is projecting that the person that they are seeing must be being violated. There are several instances in the first episode really hitting hard against cancel culture. The first being the scene with the intimacy coordinator, where he's basically telling her that she cannot even consent to what she has consented to. There's a scene where she wants to show her nipples. She is saying to him, hey, I've consented to this. This is my body. This is what I want to do for my photo shoot in my own house. And the intimacy coordinator comes back saying, well, we have to do all this paperwork and whatnot, and it's actually really progressive and better for you in the long run if we do this, instead of just listening to her and saying, okay, you've consented. Okay, we can do this. So that was really the first poignant kind of knock at cancel culture. The other poignant knocks at cancel culture that were very prevalent in the first episode that I thought carried through the entire series were quotes from Nikki Katz, the music executive, and her no f***s attitude towards things, and her, not PC way of discussing the music industry and entertainment in general. She discusses how mental illness is sexy because a crazy girl, quote unquote, might want to you, and how being a victim is the new type of quote-unquote feminist hero. These tropes are definitely projected throughout the series, as Jocelyn being this victimized feminist hero, and how her mental illness is seen as exploitative throughout the series, except at the end you realize she has played you the whole time because she is not the victim. She is kind of the ultimate villain and has been in charge of everything and has been playing Tedros with the hairbrush story that she has falsified and with her whole behaviors in order for him to help her cultivate a better album. And then once she is done with him and she's gotten what she wants, she doesn't need his disrespect anymore, and she can humiliate him on her own terms. In conclusion, I think The Idol was a fucking fantastic show that deserves a lot more recognition for its acting capabilities. I thought everyone in that show had such strong acting roles. And even if the plot wasn't perfect, and even if people had issues with the sex scenes, I don't think the sex scenes were all that terrible. They were really quite tame, and people, I think, kind of need to get over themselves and realize that this was not the most crazy show that has ever been. There has definitely been ones that are far more intense. And that The Idol is definitely worth watching, and I'm very excited to see what Lily Rose Depp and The Idol will be creating in the future. Thank you for listening to my podcast today, and I hope you have a fantastic day, and please subscribe to The Kinky Connoisseur.